Now it's time for you to chill out forever." Cassandra's voice had curled through the industrial dark like frost, and then the lock clicked, and the world went still. I remember the sting of air that bit like knives, the dull throb of my heartbeat slowing, and the strangest quiet thought. If this was how I went, it would be in a room meant to keep vegetables fresh and people forgotten. Hours later, when she crept home to find a corpse and found me instead, alive, warm, and sitting on her sofa with a glass of her best wine, her screams split the air like shattering crystal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Dorothy Whitman, though everyone calls me Dot, and 6 months before the freezer, I believed I had the kind of luck you whisper about so you don't scare it off. My husband, Harold, had died after 47 years of shared passwords and morning coffee, and my son Michael moved back in with his new wife to take care of me, as they put it, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder the way people touch old piano lids. I wanted to be grateful. I was 69 and suddenly alone in the big house with the lemon tree, the one Harold and I planted the spring we decided to be brave enough for a second mortgage. When Michael carried boxes up to the guest room at 9 a.m. that first Sunday, he whistled our old road trip tune and said, "Mom, it'll be good for all of us." Cassandra smiled beside him with a grace that could slice fruit. Neat bob, pale lipstick, hands that looked like they'd never lifted anything heavier than a crystal flute. "Family is everything," she said, and I thought, God help me, maybe I will be all right. Grief has a way of fogging the edges of sunlight, and in that fog, Cassandra was dazzling. She arranged flowers in cool whites and creams. She labeled the pantry in crisp handwriting. She called me Dot, with a honeyed lilt that made me feel looked after. But then one morning my reading glasses weren't on the study desk, where I leave them every night at 10 p.m. "You've been misplacing things," she murmured, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with sympathetic precision. A week later, my bedroom clock silently blinked 12 o'clock, and after sleeping past 8 a.m., I woke to Cassandra's worried hand against my forehead while she told Michael, "She seems confused." The pills I set each Sunday at 6 p.m. appeared in different cabinets. "It happens," Michael said, kissing my hair, his voice trying to be both strong and soft. "Mom, maybe just for a while. Assisted living." I laughed then, brittle and bright. "I can still balance a checkbook to the penny, sweetheart." Still the fog thickened. The first crack of clarity arrived on a Wednesday at 10:15 a.m., as ordinary as a sunbeam on polished wood. I heard Cassandra in my study, the private room where Harold's mahogany desk lived like an old friend. Her voice was urgent and low, shaped by secrets. 99 million, she whispered. "The old bat has 99 million just sitting there. Insurance, Harold's business, investments." My teacup went cold in my hands. She breathed the name Marcus, promised him that once I was gone, Michael would inherit and she would control it all. I stood frozen in the hallway while the grandfather clock ticked in small, disbelieving heartbeats, and the house, which had been my sanctuary, shifted under my feet into a set for a different kind of story. That night at dinner, she served my favorite pot roast with rosemary, whose smell could make me believe in Sunday. She smiled and said, "Dot, you seem tired lately. Maybe we should look into getting you some help." Michael nodded, and there it was, the script sliding into place, the lines I refused to say. I waited until the next morning when she breezed into the study uninvited and reached for my brokerage statements. "You don't need to worry about complicated papers anymore," she cooed, nails gleaming like tiny knives. I pulled the documents back and sat taller. "These accounts are in my name," I said, hearing Harold's steadiness surface in my voice. "And Cassandra," I added, laying my glasses on the desk and meeting her eyes so there would be no mistaking me. "I know exactly what you're doing." For a blink, the sugar on her voice crystallized into something sharp and bare. "Someone your age can find all this overwhelming," she tried, but the mask was slipping and we both felt it. "Pack your bags," I told her, my throat warm with the heat of a courage I thought I'd misplaced with my husband's slippers. "Both of you, I'll call my lawyer at 9 a.m. tomorrow." She smiled then, and it wasn't human. It was the smile of a snake uncurling. "Oh, Dot," she said softly, "we will leave, but not the way you think." Michael came to me that evening with the careful voice people use for frightened animals. "Mom, Cassandra told me about your conversation," he began at 7 p.m., and I watched him try to hold two truths in one pair of hands: the mother who raised him and the woman who had stitched herself into his life with silk thread. "She's worried, we both are." I said, "Your wife is trying to steal my money." And even as the words left my mouth, I heard how they would sound to a son whose heart wanted to believe the best. He flinched, pained. "Please, Mom, these paranoid thoughts. This isn't like you." Cassandra had salted the ground so well that nothing I planted could grow. I took a breath and bargained for time. "If it will help you feel better, I'll see Dr. Peterson next week," I said, and he squeezed my hand like a boy who had lost the map and didn't want to admit it. That night, lying awake, I heard their voices through the thin wall like damp through plaster. "Has to be done carefully," Cassandra murmured. "Can't look suspicious." A pause, then Michael's worried rumble. "We just want what's best." I pressed the pillow over my ears, but no other way slipped through like smoke. She arrived the next morning in a glittering mood that rang false, sunlight on broken glass. "Dot, just us today," she chimed at 9:30 a.m., a picnic basket brightness that made my skin crawl. "I want to show you my catering warehouse. I'm so proud of what I've built." Grief makes you tired, and tired people agree to tours they should refuse. The warehouse sat in an industrial corridor where wind piped through chain link and the air smelled like steel. She led me through gleaming prep tables and humming compressors, a queen showing off her cold kingdom. "The freezer is my pride and joy," she said, laying a palm on a door big enough to keep a secret fresh forever. "Restaurant grade, keeps everything perfect." She pulled the handle and a wall of white breath rolled out. "Want to see?" The push was not violent, only decisive, the way you push an elevator button when you've already decided which floor someone should live on. I stumbled, turned, and heard the metal sigh shut. From the other side, her voice slid through the seal. "You always said I was cold, Dot. Time to chill out." Then the lock clicked, and I felt the world drop 2 degrees. The first breath burned, the second steadied. I looked at the temperature gauge, its red needle kissing numbers that meant danger. "You have 30 minutes, I told myself, because naming a thing keeps it from swallowing you whole. The room was 12 feet by 8 feet, stacked with labeled bins, rigid bags, and frost that glittered like crushed diamonds. Then I saw it, an emergency kit bolted to the wall, the quiet kind of mercy regulations insist on. A blanket, thin and silver as a promise. A flashlight. And, like a miracle people try to keep simple, an interior release handle. I wrapped myself tight and pressed my back to the door until the ache turned to heat. When I finally lifted the handle, I didn't fling the door wide. I cracked it, felt a thin ribbon of warmer air touch my cheek, and thought, not yet. If Cassandra believed I had died, she would step out of character and into confession. I needed that. The longer I stayed, the clearer I thought. I pulled out bins and found, behind bags of peas and boxes of hors d'oeuvres, a waterproof pouch with edges rubbed shiny by handling. Inside, copies of medical notes with my name stamped across invented symptoms, a power of attorney bearing my perfect false signature, and a neat, brutal timeline of my decline. Nestled beneath the papers, a life insurance policy I'd never seen, $5 million to my son, documented 2 months earlier. I held those pages and felt heat bloom in my chest that had nothing to do with the blanket. She hadn't only planned to steal, she had planned to own even the story of my final breath. At 3 p.m., footsteps crossed the concrete outside, slow and staged. "Dot?" Cassandra's voice floated in with feigned alarm, a singer on the wrong note. "Dot, are you in here?" The show began. The gasp, the practiced tremble, the call to 911 delivered with a performance-ready quaver. She must have wandered in. She gets confused. I stood in the crack of the door, breath quiet, heart steady, and let the lie spool out into official record. Paramedics arrived, voices clipped and busy. "Tragic," one man murmured. "Dementia, happens all the time." After engines faded and the warehouse settled back into its hum, I slid the door open, stepped into air that didn't bite, and felt something in me harden into resolve. I didn't leave a corpse in there. I left a decoy. I had her forged pages, the time-stamped photos on my phone, the beginnings of a map. And I had a new, cold certainty. I would not run. I would wait, watch, and make her look into the face she thought she had already buried. The warehouse emptied into a silence so thick I could hear my pulse counting time. I stayed hidden another hour, crouched behind a prep counter, until the shadows outside stretched long and the building exhaled its workday breath. At 6 p.m., I crept into Cassandra's office, where the air smelled of perfume and printer ink. On her desk, the computer still hummed with an open email draft to an insurance adjuster. Subject line, claim process for policy 3458. I took photos of everything, forged documents, spreadsheets detailing projected payouts, even her decline schedule, where my death was penciled in beside an entry that read, "Symptoms visibly worsen." It was methodical evil, neat as a ledger. Then I found the leather-bound journal. Inside, each page traced a mind that had long stopped believing in accidents, entries about progressive manipulation, trust conditioning, and final phase execution. I slipped the journal into my bag, checked my phone camera roll, 112 images, and walked out into the cooling dusk. At 7 p.m., Cassandra returned home, expecting a ghost story with no ghost. The spare key sat, as always, under the fake rock by the roses. I let myself in, turned on a lamp, and arranged the evidence on her coffee table with a glass of her Merlot in hand. When the front door clicked open, her cheerful hum froze mid-note. The purse slid from her fingers, the color drained from her face. I took a slow sip and said, "Hello, dear. I hope you don't mind that I let myself in. We need to talk." The scream she gave was pure theater. If she'd saved it for 911, she might have won an award. How did you," she stammered, "escape your little freezer trap?" I finished for her. "Or find your charming diary?" I lifted the journal between two fingers. "Really, Cassandra, written confessions are so last century." She straightened, reaching for composure like a lost glove. "You broke into my private property," she said, voice trembling just enough. "That's illegal." I laughed, dry and low. "Darling, we crossed that line back when you decided to murder me." Her eyes darted toward the kitchen, calculating. "Where's Michael?" I asked, my tone casual as I scrolled through the photos on my phone. "Planning my funeral, perhaps?" Her jaw clenched. "Michael doesn't know anything about this." "No, of course not," I said softly. "You were saving the surprise." I leaned forward, letting the journal fall open to her own handwriting. Day 43. Dot is becoming suspicious. Must accelerate timeline. Cassandra's throat worked like she'd swallowed glass. "You forged my signature. You insured me like cattle. You called me senile to my own son." She shifted, trying for tears. "Dot, please. You're misunderstanding everything. I love Michael. I would never hurt him." "You don't love anyone," I said. "You love what they own." The front door opened again. Michael's voice floated in, weary and broken. "Cass, I got your message about Mom." He stepped into the room, and his knees almost gave out when he saw me sitting there, very much alive. "Mom?" he whispered. She said you died." "I nearly did," I told him, "but I thought you deserved the truth first." I handed him the journal. His fingers trembled as he read, each line draining the color from his face. "Cass," he said finally, voice small, "tell me this isn't real." Cassandra launched into her last performance. "Michael, she's delusional. She broke in. She wrote that herself." But his eyes were moving faster now, scanning pages that described conversations they'd never had, schemes that preceded their marriage. "These entries are from before we even moved in," he said, the realization cutting through him. "You planned this." "She's jealous of us," Cassandra cried, desperation cracking her voice. "She can't stand that you love someone else." But Michael's voice had gone very quiet. "Spineless husband," he read aloud. "That's what you called me, isn't it?" Cassandra's mask shattered. "You are spineless. You let your mother run your life." Her rage filled the room like a storm breaking. Then suddenly she spat it out. "Yes, I planned to kill the old bat. Someone had to. She was never going to die, and all that money was wasted on her." Silence fell heavy as snowfall. Michael closed the journal and looked at me, his face pale with horror. "Mom," he said softly, "do you have proof besides this?" I showed him the photos, the forged signatures, the insurance policy with her fake handwriting. His hands shook as he picked up the phone. Cassandra made for the door, but I was faster. The wine bottle in my hand found her ankle with a solid thud, and she crumpled, gasping. Michael blocked the exit. "Don't," he said, voice steady now. "Just don't." Minutes later, blue and red lights spilled through the windows. When the police cuffed her, Cassandra's composure returned long enough for one last barb. "You should have just died quietly." I looked her in the eye and said, "You first." That night, as I sat in my kitchen with Michael, the steam from our tea rose between us like forgiveness learning to breathe again. "How could I not see it?" he asked, voice breaking. I squeezed his hand. "Because you loved her, and love makes us blind to the cold." I looked toward the window where the night was quiet and whole again, and thought, sometimes the only way to survive the freeze is to become the fire. 3 weeks after Cassandra's arrest, the house still carried her scent, vanilla candles and expensive deceit, but each open window thinned it a little. At 9 a.m. one Monday, Detective Richardson called and asked me to come in. His office smelled like burnt coffee and paperwork. "Mrs. Whitman," he said, sliding a file across the desk, "your daughter-in-law's real name isn't Cassandra Mills." The photos inside showed her with different hair, different names. "Jennifer Cash," he continued, "married Robert Turner in Phoenix in 2019. He died 6 months later, hiking accident. She inherited everything." He turned another page. "Then she became Caroline Miller in Denver. Husband number 2, Frank Wilson. Heart attack in his sleep at 52. No cardiac history. I counted 7 faces of the same woman." "7?" I whispered. He nodded. "You're the first to survive." The news hollowed me out in a way even the freezer hadn't. She hadn't just been a greedy woman. She'd been a practiced predator. "The FBI will want a statement," Richardson said gently. I stared at the photographs, realizing that each man's smile had once been like my son's, open, certain, blind to danger. I thought about all the funerals that ended with checks cashed and families wondering why it all went wrong. "Tell them I'll do whatever they need," I said. Justice, I realized, isn't about revenge. It's about stopping the next person before it's too late. The Bureau sent Agent Patricia Vance, a woman whose eyes seemed to catalog everything. She arrived at 10 a.m. on a gray Tuesday and took notes as I told her every detail: the misplaced glasses, the hidden pills, the sweet tone that always came before the sting. "She researches her victim's health," Vance said, tapping her pen. "Finds plausible causes of death: heart failure, hypothermia, allergic reaction." "She studied me," I murmured, disgust curling like smoke. Vance nodded. "You were her largest target yet. Your late husband's fortune made you irresistible." After the interview, I drove to Harold's grave. The sky was the color of unpolished pewter. "I wish you could see this," I told the stone. "You always said I was tougher than I looked." The wind stirred the leaves, and for a heartbeat, I could almost hear his low chuckle. "Damn right you are, Dot." I smiled through tears and left a single lemon blossom from the tree we'd planted, a promise that some things survive every winter. Michael moved back home for a while. He couldn't stand the quiet of their old apartment. At night, he pored over credit card statements, chasing every forged charge, every false account she'd opened in my name. "I have to fix it," he said, eyes rimmed red at 11 p.m. I touched his shoulder. "You already did. You believed the truth." He shook his head. "I believed her first." "You chose love," I said softly. "That's not a sin. It's just human." By February, the investigation uncovered a storage unit in Denver, a macabre museum of Jennifer Cash's life, wedding photos, jewelry from the dead, forged wills. In the back, the agents found a safe with over $2 million in cash and gold coins. We'll distribute it to the victims' families, Vance told me over the phone. And there's more, a notebook listing her next 5 targets. You likely saved their lives. I sat on my porch that evening, the air cool and merciful, and realized survival had given me something rarer than money: purpose. When the trial began in September, the courthouse buzzed like a hive. Reporters lined the steps shouting questions about the Freezer widow. I walked past them in my Navy suit, head high. Jennifer Cash looked small in her orange jumpsuit, her arrogance stripped to bone. On the stand, I spoke for 2 hours, describing how she'd tried to erase me from my own life. The defense attorney smiled too easily. "Mrs. Whitman, you're 69, he said. Is it possible you misinterpreted her concern?" I met his gaze. "Young man, I built a multi-million-dollar portfolio, raised a son alone, and survived being locked in a freezer by a serial killer. My mind is fine." The courtroom rippled with quiet laughter, and I saw Michael's shoulders relax for the first time in months. When they played the warehouse recording, her calm voice calling 911 to report my accidental death, the jury's faces hardened. The journal sealed it. Her neat handwriting describing murder as if it were grocery planning left no doubt. On the 3rd day, the verdict came. Guilty on every count. 7 life sentences, no parole. As they led her away, she looked back once, eyes burning through me with hatred so pure it almost made me pity her. Almost. Afterward, the prosecutor shook my hand. "You did more than survive," he said. "You stopped a killer." But I knew survival was only the beginning. A year passed after the trial, yet sometimes I still woke at 3 a.m., tasting frost in the back of my throat. Healing, I learned, doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing what stays. One afternoon, while cleaning Harold's old office, I found a sealed envelope hidden beneath the false bottom of his desk drawer. His handwriting, steady, deliberate, read, "For Dot, if something terrible ever happens." My breath caught as I unfolded the letter. "My dearest Dot," it began, "if you're reading this, then someone has tried to hurt you, and you need to know the truth about our finances." As I read on, my hands trembled. Harold had suspected long ago that our growing wealth might attract danger. Quietly, methodically, he had moved portions of our assets into hidden trusts. "The $99 million Cassandra knows about is only part of it," he wrote. "The real total is closer to $250 million. I kept it secret so you could live without fear, but if someone ever tries to steal it, these records will protect you." My throat tightened as I turned the final page. "If they harm you, know that 90% of our fortune is already pledged to charity. No one can profit from your death, Dot, not even the clever ones." I sat there in the afternoon light, tears sliding down my cheeks. Harold had shielded me even from beyond the grave. When I met with my attorney at 10 a.m. the next morning, he shook his head in disbelief. "Your husband booby-trapped your estate," he said. "If she'd succeeded, she would have killed you for pocket change." I couldn't help but laugh through the ache. He always did believe in preventative measures. That day, I chose not to hide the money away again. I decided to activate the foundation Harold had envisioned, the Harold and Dorothy Whitman Foundation for Elder Safety. Its mission, to help seniors recognize, report, and recover from financial abuse. Our first grant funded free legal aid for elderly victims of fraud. Standing at the podium during the announcement, I looked out at the faces of people who could have been me and said, "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is, and never let anyone convince you your life is past its worth." The applause that followed felt like sunlight after a long winter. Michael found love again, a quiet woman named Sarah who taught kindergarten and preferred books to jewelry. They married in a small courthouse ceremony at 11 a.m. with coffee and muffins instead of champagne. Watching them smile, I saw a peace in my son I hadn't seen since childhood. "You sure this one isn't after my fortune?" I teased. He rolled his eyes. "Mom, she doesn't even know how much we have." Then his expression softened. I made sure love came first this time. By October, the days had grown shorter, but my garden was alive with late roses. I spent my evenings there, pruning, breathing, learning the new rhythm of being alive. Agent Vance called one evening at 6 p.m. with an update. "We've linked Jennifer Cash to 3 additional murders," she said. "Your survival helped us bring justice to 11 families." I thanked her, then sat for a long time under the fading light, letting the hum of crickets settle the quiet. Proud, yes, but also humbled. It struck me that sometimes surviving isn't about winning. It's about refusing to vanish. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I poured a glass of Harold's favorite wine and lifted it toward the sky. "To second chances," I whispered, "to resilience, and to the lesson that no one decides your worth but you." The glass caught the last rays of light, glowing deep ruby before the night folded around me. The world was cold once, but I had learned to be fire, and as long as I breathe, I will never let anyone freeze me again. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching.